As the sun rises and the cool of the day begins, people in the town begin to walk out. They begin the process of what they've always done day in and day out. They work their jobs, trying their best to get their work done in the cool of the day. And as they are diligently working and as they are beginning to do all the things that they usually do, they interact with one another. And as the town comes together and begins to work, they talk. They interact. It's just a small village. Everybody knows one another. Everybody knows everything about one another. And as the day drags on and that scorching desert sun rises into the air, they begin to retreat into their homes in an effort to stay cool. And as the village finally comes to a brief standstill in the heat of the day, as the scorching desert sun sits overhead, there is silence. The hustle and bustle pauses for just a moment, save for one individual. As one woman, carrying a jar, steps out into the village and begins to walk a very familiar, well-worn path out to the well. While everybody else in the morning was going out to do their business, to work on what they needed to work on, she was elsewhere. She was trying her best to stay hidden, trying not to be noticed. And so she chooses at the heat of the day to go where nobody would go, which is out to the well. And so as she begins this very familiar, very well-worn path, carrying this jug, her head down, because she's done this so often, she knows no one's going to speak to her. She knows no one's going to interact with her, because who would be out here in the heat of the day? Who would be at the well at this time? She's been here 100 times. She's done her best to avoid others. Of course, there's a reason she steps out here in the heat of the day, because in the heat of the day, nobody will be there. None of the women who would look at her, who would mock her, who would scoff at her, who would whisper about her. She goes because there is silence and solitude. Sure, that punishing desert sun would bake down on her, but it's a small price to pay just to be alone, just so nobody would see her. So imagine her surprise when she looks up for just a moment and notices in the distance at the well that there is sitting there a man. Now that's already surprising enough, because who would be out here in the heat of the day alone? But as she looked a little harder, she realized this wasn't just any man, this was a Jewish man. In the back of her mind, she thought, great. All the work that I've done to avoid all of the ridicule, all the work that I've done to have some solitude, to avoid the people who would belittle me, and now of all people, a Jewish man sits out at the well. And he has nothing but disdain for me, and I have nothing but disdain for him. Perhaps he won't notice. Perhaps if I keep my head down, perhaps if I stay to myself, perhaps he won't see me. But as she takes a few steps forward and the thought crosses her mind, her fears are realized. As he looks up, he sees her. And for a moment she thinks, how badly do I need water? Do I need to go up to this well? Is it really worth it? I mean, perhaps I'll die if I don't get water, but maybe it's worth it. Desperately desiring not to be around anybody, desperately desiring so much to just avoid being around others so that she wouldn't have to deal with the ridicule, she wouldn't have to deal with the negativity, with the people looking down on her as she has her entire life. So she keeps walking, hoping maybe that when she arrives there that he'll keep to himself. He'll do the smart thing. He'll do the thing that most people would do, that he'll look away. He won't say a word. He won't interact. He won't get involved. And she can come here in peace, do what she needs to do, and go home. Perhaps if she goes in with her head low and she does what she needs to do, perhaps he'll look the other way. He'll keep his eyes averted away from her. He won't give her a thought. But as she approaches the well, she notices he sees her. And as she sets down her jar and looks into the well, unwilling to say anything, she tries to look away. She tries not to acknowledge, perhaps trying to indicate her desire not to be spoken to. Indicating her own disdain for this individual, this disdain towards somebody who is of a different class than her, is of a different place than her, is of a group of people that her people do not associate with. And as she is trying to communicate that, she notices that he takes a breath and opens his mouth as if to speak. And in that moment, she thinks, what words could possibly come out of his mouth? What kind of bigoted phrases might he say? What kind of demeaning language would he use? What would he call her? How would he belittle her? What vile phrase could come out of his mouth as to belittle her, disrespect her, communicate his disdain for her? What awful, evil thing could he possibly say that she hadn't heard before? The truth of the matter is, she's heard it all. Whatever it was he was about to say, she was anticipating it. She knew, she was smart enough to know that somebody was going to hurt her, that somebody was going to say something to undermine her, to belittle her, something bigoted, something hateful, something that was personal, and she knew it was coming. She knew that whatever was about to come out of this man's mouth was going to be evil and vile and hurtful, and she prepared to hear it, and the words that came to her were, "Can I have a drink of water?" The gall of this man to ask for water, when all I wanted was for him to disrespect me. All I wanted was for him to say something that was going to be offensive, so I could turn away, so I could turn a blind eye, so I could pretend it didn't happen, so I could raise my defenses and walk away. How dare he ask me for water? And so what does she respond with? She says, "Excuse me, I don't know if you've noticed, sir, but I'm a Samaritan woman and you are a Jewish man. Why are you talking to me?" Of course, she doesn't want to be spoken to. She's just trying to get in, get out, do what she needs to do. Why is it that you, a Jewish man, would ask me for water? See, she doesn't know what his play is. Clearly there's an angle he's working. Clearly there's a setup she's not seeing. Clearly he has some hook. There's some string attached to this. There's some angle she's not seeing. What is his play? What is his game? What is it he's trying to get at? How is he trying to manipulate this situation to hurt her? She wants to know. She doesn't see it. She doesn't see the angle he's running, and she's quite frankly not ready to play that game. And so she says, "Okay, fine. Why are you talking to me? Why would you be talking to me and asking me for a drink of water?" Sensing the disdain, the man looks at her and says, "If you knew who it was who was asking you for water, then maybe you'd be asking him, and he'd give you living water." The woman sits there for a moment. Again, this is not the response that she was anticipating. She was anticipating some underhanded comments, perhaps maybe for him to insist that because she was a Samaritan and he was a Jew, that he deserved for her to serve him. Perhaps, maybe not even because of that. Maybe perhaps just because she was a woman. But no, he insists that he has something to offer. And she doesn't want it. Whatever he's selling, she's not buying. She's been down that road before. She's jaded. She's been here before. She doesn't trust that whatever it is he's offering is worthwhile, and so she is trying to remove herself from that situation as much as possible. Have no idea what he means by living water, but she thinks, I'm going to get myself out of this situation, so she comes at him and says, how is it that you would offer me anything? You don't even have anything to draw water with. If you think you're so great to offer me something, and you don't even have anything to draw water with, do you think that you're so much better than me? That you have so much more to offer me? Are you so much better than Israel himself, who came and dug this well? Who brought forth this water that we still drink to this day? Are you so much better than him? And the man snickers a little bit, right? And the man's starting to realize where this is going. He gives her a look, and she says, fine. If you do insist, and if you are going to offer, fine. Why don't you give me some of this living water? He says, the difference between what I'm offering and what you have here now is that you're going to be back here at this well tomorrow. What I'm offering is something that never goes away. The water I offer will quench your thirst forever, and you will never have to return to get more. It will satisfy you. And she says, well, that sounds great. Still don't know what his play is. Still don't know what he's doing. But she is trying so hard not to speak to this man. She is coming up with every conceivable plan to walk away, but he sees her, and he knows. But she tries again. She says, fine, if that's the case, why don't you give me some of this living water so I don't have to keep coming back to this well? And you can hear the disdain in her voice, the pain of having to be isolated, of having to be separated, the pain that she is never with anybody else, the pain that she is out here in the heat of the day when everybody else comes in the morning, the pain that she is rejected. It'd be one less thing for her to worry about. Fine, I'll take some of that living water if you're offering. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to offer me living water? And so then things take a turn. Because once again, he says something that she wasn't expecting. So she says, fine, give me some of this living water. He says, fine, go get your husband and come back. That one question was the one question she came here in the heat of the day when everybody else was walking in the morning. She came out in the heat of the day to avoid the sneers and the snickers and the whispers and the gossip and the rumors. That is the one question she did not want asked. And somehow he saw her and he knew that. But that was kind of a tough subject, and she understood that. She just really did not want to address that with some stranger, let alone a stranger she could not make sense of. And so he asks, go get your husband. Come back here. And she says, looking down at the well and away from him, As she sets down the jar, she takes a breath and she says, I don't have a husband. And then she thought, this is the moment. This is the moment he'll walk away. This is the moment he'll start offering his bigoted remarks. He'll offer his remarks about how unwanted I am, or how unvaluable I am, or how broken I am, how dirty I am, how rejected I am. He'll start offering his comments and his commentary on my life and my decisions and how I might have ended up in the situation that I'm in. He surely has opinions about it. Now he'll offer them to me. Now he'll offend me. Now I'll be able to walk away. And again, he says something she wasn't expecting, which is, you're right. First of all, that's not new information to her, but it was new information that he knew that. He says, right. As a matter of fact, you've had several husbands, and the man you're with right now is not your husband. At this point, she's taken aback. That's not information anyone should have, especially not somebody from out of town, especially not somebody from out of the region, and it's not information that she would have shared publicly. It was shameful. It was the bane of her existence, a mark on her to society that she was rejected, that she was broken, that she was unwanted. But she's not really willing to have that conversation. She didn't come to the well to deal with her problems. She came to the well to get water. And that's all she came here to do. She doesn't want to deal with her problems. She doesn't want to open up to this individual. She doesn't want to deal with this because guess what? When she walks back in her mind, there is nothing that he can do to fix that. She's just broken. She's just too far gone. There is absolutely nothing he can offer her that is going to remedy the fact that she is broken. And so she's thinking to herself, how do I get out of this situation? How do I walk away? She figures out clearly this man is a man of God because nobody else would know what he knows. But being that he is a man of God, he knows Scripture well, and he spends a lot of time in Scripture, he is still, despite all of that, a Jew. And he is going to get heated if I bring up the right hot button issue. If I bring up something controversial, he'll take the bait, he'll say something, and I'll get to walk away from this. So what does she say? She says, well, I can see that you're clearly a prophet, since you know so much about me. Why don't you tell me this? Your people say that you can only worship God in Jerusalem, but my people have been worshiping on this mountain for years. Who's right? Now she's put him in quite the position because otherwise he has to say something that undermines her entire belief system and is meant to be offensive to her so that she can say, aha, you started the fight, I'm done with you, I'm walking away. Or he has to undermine his own beliefs. Or at least that's what she's thinking. But she wasn't prepared for what he said next. He said, the Jews worship what they do know, and the Samaritans worship what they don't know. And of course, the Jews know because it was given to them, and of course we know salvation comes first from the Jews. And you can see her eyes roll. Of course a Jew would say that salvation comes from the Jews. It's a little ironic when you know who he is. But he says, there is a day coming and yet has come, where those who worship will neither worship here nor there, but instead they will worship in spirit and in truth. Because those who are made of spirit will worship in spirit because God is spirit. And she thinks to herself, that was not the response I was going for. And it's cryptic and it's deep, but it's meaningful because there's something about what he said There's something about what this man of God has just said that clicks with her. That it's not going to matter where we are or who we are, but that we worship in spirit and in truth. How could somebody have such authority to claim such a thing? How could somebody say that one day we're all going to worship together? What a radical statement. It seems unclear to her. It's not making sense to her. So she goes with the cop-out answer and she says, well, I know that when Messiah comes, he'll answer that question for us. I know that when the Christ comes, he'll have the answers. He'll be able to tell all of us. He'll be able to make it known to everybody what the truth is. And he'll stand before everybody in grandeur and in glory. And people will bow down to him. People will recognize him. And he won't have time for somebody like me. But the man saw her, looked at her and said, the one whom you're speaking of, that's me. Those are the words she was not expecting, but those words radically changed her life, because it was in that moment she recognized several things. She recognized that while she believed for most of her life that God was distant from her, that God had forsaken her, that God had forgotten her, she recognized that God did see her. And not just see her at a distance, but saw who she was. God saw the mistakes. Christ saw the mistakes. Christ saw how broken she was, saw how deeply rooted in her sin she was. He saw how lost she was. He saw how tied to these worldly things she was. He saw how broken she was. But he also saw how badly she needed redemption. He saw how badly she needed reconciliation. He saw how deeply she desired to be fixed. She deeply desired to be healed. She deeply desired for things to be put back together in a way that she believed was impossible. But with God, all things are possible. God saw the need to heal the broken. More than that, God saw her not just for what she had done or what she was doing or where she was living in, but what she would be. Because in the moments after this conversation, she went to her village as they were all staying away in the heat of the day, and she said, "You need to see this man. He has completely changed my life, and he is the Messiah. He is the Christ." That moment changed the lives of not only her, but everyone in her village and everyone in the region. Because she was willing to speak up, because her life was changed, many other people's lives were changed. When Christ saw her, he saw what she would be, not simply what she had been. When Christ saw her, he didn't just see what was broken, he didn't just see what was wrong, but he saw her needs, and he came to fulfill those needs. Because she recognized that the Messiah sat right in front of her. Why would the Messiah sit right in front of her? Why would the Messiah come on that day, at that time, to her well and speak to her? Because she needed him. So he came. God showed us his love by sending his son, not just to die, but to live, to show us that God doesn't just see when we are at our best, but God sees us at our worst. Paul would say it in Romans when he says that at just the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It was not at our best that God came to us. It wasn't at our best that Christ came to us, but it was at our worst. It was at the bottom. And this woman, that's where she was. And she thought, how could God possibly see me? But when she realized the Messiah was there, it was the moment of recognition that God saw her, God loved her, and God was willing to give her what she needed. God wanted her. In a world full of people that didn't want her, in a world full of people who saw her as too broken, as too unfixable, as a lost cause, God saw her and saw value in her. God wanted her and desired her and came to her. God sees you. And He doesn't just see maybe all of the mistakes that you've made. He doesn't just see your daily life either, walking up that same familiar, well-beaten path in the heat of the day. He doesn't just see where you're at. He sees where you've been, and more importantly, He sees who you are, and He sees what you will be. And He knows what you can be. He values you. He knows full well what you are, what you've done. And no matter what it is, His redemptive power can bring healing. He can bring love. Here is the wonderful thing about grace. No matter how incredibly broken we are, no matter how far from God we may be, no matter how many mistakes we may make, the power of God's grace is omnipotent. And it cannot be broken by anything you or I can do. That woman thought she was too far gone. But she changed her tune when she recognized God saw her. God sees you. What is God going to do with you? What is God going to change in your life? What is God going to help you to realize? What is God going to push you to? I don't know. But what I do know is sometimes it takes recognizing that God sees you where you are. Sometimes you think, I can't do this. I'm not capable of this. I'm not good enough for this. I'm not equipped for this. I'm not equipped to do anything good. I'm a lost cause. I'm too broken. I'm too far gone. God sees you. God knows you. God can do something with you. And you don't get to tell Him otherwise either. You can't tell God what He can and can't do with you. What He is or isn't capable of doing with you. God will do amazing things. Why do you think He picked the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4? Because she was the least. In the eyes of everybody else, she was the least, and yet she did the most. You don't get to tell God what you're capable of. He already knows. And He calls you to do amazing things. I don't know what God is going to do with you. I don't know what God is going to call you to, but you better be willing to answer to that. Don't just look down and look away and hope that you can just go through your day like every other day, walk the same path that you have walked every single day and miss an opportunity. God's going to do amazing things with you if you let Him. But recognize that God is there. He's not distant. He's not in some far-off place. And He doesn't just occasionally pop in to fix some things and then pop back out. God's here. He's present. When Christ was with us, He even said, yeah, I'm walking with you right now, but you know what's even better is that when I leave, someone else is going to come, and they're not just going to walk with you, they're going to be within you. He lives within us right now to do amazing things. He lives within us right now so that we can make a difference. And when Christ came and He lived so that we could see love, He died so that we could see love. He died to purchase His church. And it's an amazing thing that we've become today. But what is God going to do with you? I don't know if you need your life, your whole life to be changed, if you need the power of His resurrection through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that you can put on in baptism. I don't know if that's what you need tonight. Maybe you need prayer because you feel like God's been distant. You feel like you've been wronged. You've been hurt. You feel like you've made too many mistakes. You feel like things are too overwhelming. They cannot be overcome. The problems are too much to bear. God sees you. I don't know what your need is tonight, but if you have a need tonight, why don't you come now as together we stand and sing.